Namaste. I'm grateful to the CTC for giving us this opportunity to discuss on a fundamentally suicidal topic, which is whether Hinduism needs protection from Hindutva. I would like to reformulate it as follows. Hinduism does need protection through Hindutva. And if anything, Hinduism needs protection from secularism. So the good part of going perhaps third in this sequence is that you get the benefit of all the gyan that has been spouted before. So let me start with this. Mr. Kunal Sarkar in the opening introduction of Mr. Aiyar mentioned that although he was born on the other side of the border, his heart is here. I think perhaps he's still on the other side of the border, insofar as his worldviews are concerned. For the simple reason that his script, I don't think, has changed in the last half a century, where he still conflates Hindutva and its origins with Savarkar and RSS, despite abundant scholarship saying so to the contrary. Fortunately, I think the saving grace of that side was Ms. Moitra, who finally came back to this land, which is actually the birthplace of Hindutva, to start off with Chandranath Boshu of 1892. Now, she highlighted certain problems with his positions with respect to child marriage, women, so on and so forth. The only question that I have is, can she not think of any other non-Hindu worldview which has a problem with reform? Or which continues to justify child marriage and misogyny in the name of whatever? I would prefer that my head is still stuck to its torso. So I'll leave it at that. Now, this is the problem. So I will split my submission in 3 parts, or perhaps 2 parts, given the paucity of time, because this is not enough, but I'll do my best to actually keep it as short as possible, thanks to the training of the Supreme Court, so keep pace with me. This is the birthplace of Hindutva because colonial power was established in Calcutta. And therefore, starting from the Brahmo movement, with the establishment of the Calcutta Unitarian Committee, with Dwarkanath Tagore, William Adams, and Sri Ram Mohan Roy, not Raja Ram Mohan Roy because that was a Mughal epithet, there was a problem between 1830s and 1860s when they realized that in the hope of succeeding and becoming a part of the colonial establishment, they had no other option but to ape and mimic the ways of the British man. Between 1860s and perhaps 1909 is when the history of Hindutva begins, not in Maharashtra, not with respect to Savarkar, because when this starts, or when this history happens, Savarkar, I think, was born in 1888. And the foundations of Hindutva were established between 1866 and 1909. Starting from the imagery of Bharat Mata that was actually put out in the form of a play or a novel in 1866 by someone who wrote under the pseudonym Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyasa. It actually turned out to be Mr. Sudeep Mukhopadhyay, who basically came out with the imagery of Bharat Mata till 1909, which is when the Uttarpara speech of that inconvenient person was delivered, which is Sri Aurobindo. Everybody spoke of Chandranath Boshu to Savarkar except Aurobindo, because Aurobindo sticks out as an inconvenient person for those people who are opponents of Hindutva, because I haven't found a more vociferous, ferocious and vehement proponent of Hindutva than Sri Aurobindo. In fact, he saw himself as an intellectual descendant of Swami Vivekananda because he believed that the very same Shakta spirit percolated into him. And this is what he had to say as far as Sanatana Dharma, nationalism and Bharat is concerned. And this I would like to share with the audience. Just give me a moment, and I think this should help. This is from Uttarpara speech. These are the last few lines of his Uttarpara speech. I'll quickly go on to the next point after this. In his speech, he basically makes the point at the end of it. I say that it is Sanatana Dharma which for us is nationalism. this Hindu nation was born with Sanatana Dharma, with it moves and with it grows. When Sanatana Dharma declines, the nation declines, and if Sanatana Dharma were capable of perishing, with Sanatana Dharma it would perish, which is the nation. The Sanatana Dharma, that is nationalism, that is the message I have to speak to you. This is Sri Aurobindo, the former revolutionary turned rishi. Let me try and contextualize Hindutva for Bengal, because this is your product, this is the birthplace of Hindutva. Between 1866 and 1909, the rishis of this place, the modern day rishis of this place, realize that Hindu society is grasit and eclipsed by two specific invading colonial powers with expansionist mindset and a predatorial mindset. And therefore they decide that we need to respond. And that response also then reverse percolates into Brahmoism, because by 1867 they realize that Brahmoism is taking people away from Hindu Dharma and it is becoming a Western mimicry and is refashioning Hinduism through a Western lens. And therefore response starts, and guess who starts with the response? Debendranath Tagore starts the Hindu Mela, which subsequently becomes the Jatiya Mela around 1867. Which is why, if you were to take a look at the views of Sri Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Dwarkanath Tagore, you will see a stark difference between their positions to Debendranath Tagore and then to Rabindranath Tagore, by which time Rabindranath Tagore had recrafted what he called Hindu Brahmoism, because he wanted to take it away from Protestant Christian roots and bring it back to Hindu Dharma. This was the response. And then comes, according to me, the patron saint of nationalism, Swami Vivekananda. I'm happy that Sri Aiyar spoke of his speech, which was delivered in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, and tomorrow being that great soul's birth anniversary. I would request people to actually go through that speech, because in that speech, Swami Vivekananda does not leave the opportunity to talk about the brutality and savagery that we have suffered at the hands of Islamic invasions. He says so in 1893 in Chicago. So we are constantly pitted in these kind of binaries. Hindutva and Hinduism are not binaries. Where does this word come from? I'm happy that Ms. Maitra actually mentioned Shakuntala Tattva and all other works of Sri Chandranath Bashu. So when he was writing these series of tattvas, he also came out with Hindutva, because Hindutva, according to him, was a portmanteau of Hinduism or Hindu Dharma and Tattva, and therefore Hindutva. I agree entirely with Swapanda that Hinduism is a 19th century construct, because it was refashioned by the British on convenient lines. Until then, the word used for it was Sanatana Dharma. And this became a necessity not only to repel mental colonization, but also to repel physical colonization, because guess what? By 1902, Anushilan Samiti had to be established by Sri Aurobindo along with others, taking what inspiration from an essay written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in 1888 called Anushilan. This is the history of Hindutva in Bengal. When someone tries to tell you that this is a North Indian invention, a vegetarian invention, sorry, this is the organic Shakta response to colonial invasion of Bharat. This is the Shakta response, therefore Hindutva has the blood of the Shaktas. Which is why Hindutva is recrafted and reimagined in the image of Durga Ma. Every revolutionary from this land who was a Shakta was expected to take oath on what? The Gita, and had to say Vande Mataram. Naturally, there were certain people who were excluded because they had problem with both. Therefore, if someone tries to tell you that Hindutva is hyper-masculine, that is because Bengali masculinity informs Hindutva. If someone tells you that Hindutva subscribes to Brahminical vegetarianism, sorry, it worships Durga Ma, and therefore it chadafies two things, meat and alcohol both. 3, wake up and smell the coffee, because this is not the subject of wine tasting discussions, because the neighboring country is doing something which I think will become the near future for us as well. You are living perhaps in the epicenter of the new great game, and if West Bengal does not become the bastion of Hindutva that it once was, then I agree, and borrowing lines from the Bengal files, we will lose the lighthouse of Bharat and the lighthouse of Hindutva. I will end with only one submission. Hindutva is a civilizational imperative, not a political tool, but there is nothing wrong in it being a political tool, because it is ironic for a politician to have a problem with a political tool. I really don't see what is the problem with Hindutva becoming a political tool, because politics is the last mile where you get the job done. But it is fundamentally a civilizational movement which has emanated from the society. Savarkar wrote only in 1922, which was published in 1923. RSS was established on Vijayadashami of 1925. Prior to that, Hindutva has had a history of 70 years. Stop buying this hogwash. Vande Mataram, Jai Shri Ram to the people in power here, and Jai Ma Kamakhya, Jai Ma Kali. Hindutva is the way of the future. This is the writing on the wall which they have a problem with.